You talk a lot about immigration. Let's slide into the immigration portion of the afternoon, evening. What is the reason why most people who are immigrants come to live in America?
It varies quite a bit. I also want to say Bernie Sanders dropped the jobs issue and dropped the working class issue. Why? Because he's put through the meat grinder of one of the main political parties. And you are not going to get, it is the uniparty in Washington against the people. That was what Trump represented, and the proof of that was the interview that Bernie gave. I think it was to Salon, and he said something about, he was asked about, I remember the guy that I can't think of his name right now. Anyway, who said, well, yeah, of course you're for open borders. And Bernie Sanders said, no, that's a Koch brothers idea. They want the cheap labor. That was what his position used to be. But then, oh no, has to be for open borders because he's running as a Democrat. That is what hurts the working class, the low-wage workers more than anything else. We're just going to keep dumping more low-wage workers on the country. And that is in answer to your question. I mean, a lot of them are coming for the welfare benefits now. As Milton Friedman said, you can't have a welfare state and open borders. And we're getting a lot of that now. Pre-1970 immigrants made more money, bought more houses than the people who already lived here. Post-1970 immigrants, vastly poorer than the people who already live here. Well, that's just competing for resources, both for government benefits and for jobs from our own poor people. How about we bring in people to compete with talk show hosts and senators and governors and Wall Street bankers? Then we'll see, you know, how much compassion we have for the rest of the world. But Mark Zuckerberg doesn't want somebody to compete with him for his job. He wants to bring in people to compete for his landscaper's job. That is how Donald Trump cares about the people who are being hurt and have been left behind and ignored by both political parties for decades now.
I have a response to that. So all it takes is a quick Google search to find that undocumented immigrants have no access to government benefits. In fact, yes. In fact, in 1996, Bill Clinton and legislators at the time made it incredibly difficult for immigrants who are in the country legally to have access to government benefits or government programs. And so it's a complete fear-mongering talking point from the right that people are coming into this country and they're mooching off American taxpayers. The only people who are mooching off of American taxpayers right now are oil companies and the wealthiest people who... And it's really a great distraction to have Americans look at the little guy and blame them for all their problems when the wealthiest people in this country are basically raping and pillaging us, right? So that's what's happening. To go back to Tere's original question about why people are coming into this country, right now, immigration from Mexico, so Mexican immigrants, is down, okay? Mexicans are not trying to come into the country the way they were before, mostly because of some of our policies, but more importantly because their economy is doing better, right? So they have no reason to come here. Economic reasons was the main reason why Mexican immigrants were coming into the U.S. But all of a sudden, we're seeing an increase of people from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador trying to cross the border. First of all, cross the border into Mexico and then cross into the United States, which has become pretty impossible considering the increased border security that we have because of the Obama administration. Now, why are they trying to come in? Well, there have been spikes in violence in those countries. Okay, there have been drug traffickers, cartels that have increased violence. You've heard about, decapitations and all that stuff. Well, the reason why they're so powerful is because of the drug war that you're very supportive of. We've spent $1 trillion on the war on drugs since 1971. We're not only wasting our resources, we're literally fueling drug cartels in other countries, which is upping the ante when it comes to undocumented immigration in the country. So that's what's happening.
A lot of studies show that the number one reason that immigrants give for illegally crossing the border is family reunification. They want to reunite with their family. Do you think that it is immoral to break immigration law to reunite with your family?
It is a total lie that illegal immigrants do not get all kinds of government assistance. Please do Google that. But don't just look up. Any idiot can write on the internet. Look it up. They can get food stamps. They go into emergency rooms. They get schooling. They get English as a second language. They get the SNAP program. They get full health care in California. It is not saying that illegal immigrants are the little guy. They're not our guys. Americans don't have a problem paying for our own poor, our own sick, our own injured. But the idea is we're like a family. We're all in this together.
Aren't you in favor of welfare reform?
And you say, but for the grace of God go I. Okay, but you don't get to, this isn't the entire world we're talking about. We're not turning America into, the universe's charity ward. We need to take care of our own. And that's what's hurting the little guy. The reason illegal immigrants say they're coming for family reunification is because that's what got you a free bus pass and a box lunch in the Obama era. Whatever they need to say to be moved into the interior of the country. But this idea that, you can't break up my family. Well, okay, all of you go back then.
I think it's hilarious that you're sitting here saying that you care about taking care of our poor people and spending our taxpayer money on government programs that help our poor people. You've been on the record on multiple occasions talking about how much you hate the welfare state. And so you don't care about taking care of anyone. You care about lower taxes for yourself, and that's pretty much it.
Is there racial bias in the criminal justice system? In the new Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander talks about black people are over-arrested, over-prosecuted, over-convicted, and over-sentenced.
Well,
right?
my favorite stat when it comes to that has to do with marijuana, because I love marijuana. So, It's interesting because there was a study looking specifically into marijuana use rates, and they compared white marijuana users to black marijuana users, and the researchers found, all right, they use marijuana at similar rates. But it's interesting because blacks are 4 times more likely to be arrested and prosecuted for marijuana possession. Which is, by the way, I don't care if you're black, white, Asian, Latino, it doesn't matter. You shouldn't be prosecuted for marijuana possession. That's a gigantic waste of our resources. But I found that study so interesting because, again, we're talking about similar rates. But why is it that one group gets targeted more often than the other group?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought this up. This is based on self-reports. There have been further studies where they actually drug test the person after asking, do you smoke pot? Have you smoked pot in the last week? And it turns out there's a racial difference in telling the truth on did you smoke pot. Blacks were about 10 times more likely to lie and say they hadn't smoked pot. Point 2, you can find it. I'll email it to you and you can post it. But the second point is nobody goes to prison for possession of pot.
That's untrue.
More than No, I know you're all potheads and you're going to have trouble following what I'm about to say. But as you will be able to read in failing New York Times, almost 90% of people in prison are in prison as a result of a plea bargain. No one gets arrested and tried for possession of marijuana. But if they happen to have marijuana on them, That's what they plea it down to. You don't need witnesses, you don't need a trial.
But
So
that
it
was-
may be on the record, but you're not going to prison for that. You're going to prison because you held up a liquor store with a sawed-off shotgun and they found pot on you.
No. May I jump in? This is one of my favorite topics. I did a TEDx talk on it, so there's been a lot of research into this. Why do you guys think we have private prisons? Why are our taxpayer dollars going toward private prisons? And why do we even need them, right? Don't we have county prisons, federal prisons? Well, it's because in the 1980s, because of Republican leadership, we passed a bunch of draconian laws, specifically in regard to marijuana. And so our prison systems, all of a sudden, were just filled with people who got caught with possession of pot, right? And so, these entrepreneurs see that there's some, there's an entrepreneurial opportunity here. And so you have the emergence of Corrections Corporation of America and Geo Group. And guess what they did? They're like, give us your nonviolent drug offenders and make us rich. So your tax dollars aren't really going to welfare recipients and all these little guys that, people want to distract you with. They're going to private industries like private prisons who have a vested interest to criminalize nonviolent individuals, particularly those who get caught with drugs.
Should marijuana be legal?
No, you can legalize all the drugs you want once there isn't a welfare state. But no, marijuana makes people retarded, especially when they're young. We've got enough busboys. We're bringing in busboys by the million through our immigration policy. We do not need a country of busboys. We're destroying the country.
Should marijuana be legal?
Absolutely. In fact, I wish you would smoke a joint and relax a little bit. Marijuana does not make people the word that you just said, which is ridiculous. How many of you guys don't have to raise your hands if you feel uncomfortable? How many of you guys smoke pot? Okay. Yeah. Well, there are lawmakers in this country that would like to see you in prison. Jeff Sessions happens to be one of them, okay? In fact, marijuana laws have been so draconian that it has allowed members of the DEA to do something known as civil asset forfeiture, which is if you are even suspected of being in possession of drugs or trafficking drugs, they can go ahead and take your home, they can take your money, they can take your car, they can take your property, because, hey, they're investigating you. And guess what? Only a tiny fraction of those individuals ever get their property back. You don't have to be convicted of anything. You don't have to even face any serious charges. It's just based on suspicion. And Obama actually brought that back a little bit, reeled it back in a little bit. Jeff Sessions comes into power, and all of a sudden, no, civil asset forfeiture, awesome. Let's take property away from these innocent Americans who haven't done anything wrong, but hey, our local police enforcement and the DEA need some resources. So